Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Vade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimani Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So today, as we were talking, is we're going to do chapter 3, so Karma Yoga, which is obviously super foundational to pretty much everything else when it comes to our spiritual journey, at least within this sort of model or context. Now, a lot of us obviously have been at this or are of Indian descent, so at a certain level we know what Karma Yoga means, right? So maybe we're going to start with that, and then let's talk about karma just in a more general, because I think that word gets used a lot, especially like Westerners will use that word. And it's kind of like, I know you kind of know what that means, but I don't know if we know entirely what that means, right? It's more complicated than that, obviously. So anyone wanna, what's the definition of Karma Yoga? I mean,
it's like deeds,
Deeds?
good and bad.
Okay.
And then, yeah, basically it means that, according to me.
Okay.
If I were to explain it to somebody.
So is that karma or Karma Yoga?
Yeah, I mean, if you throw in the word yoga, then I think, even as a Hindu, I don't know what it means.
So when it's selfless, it becomes yoga. I mean, otherwise, these are just actions.
Right. So I think, it's sort of the bumper sticker definition of Karma Yoga is, you'll see it like, and I'll make joking Indian accents, do your best, let God do the rest, right? That's it, right? So, I mean, in that sense, when you look at it that way, why do you need okay, we're done. Do your best, let God do the rest. Okay, we're finished. Okay, see ya, right? Like, why do we need to do more, right? So then the question is, okay, how do we do karma, or what does karma really mean? And then what's the difference between karma and Karma Yoga? Because they're obviously interlinked, but they're different. So that was why I wanted to give you guys, before we go too much into the chapter, and I know it's a little bit of I don't want to say a distraction, but I think it will help round it out. And I think even people who have been studying Indian philosophy may or may not know all this stuff, you guys. So when we look at karma, right? So what does karma mean if we just take the literal translation?
So in my transliteration here, I can see karma is translated as duties.
Duties, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? So yes, there's a kind of karma that's your duties.
It's a verb, actions.
Action, yeah. That's far and away the most common way that people define it. Okay, so then when we say like, oh, it's my karma, or don't do that, you'll get bad karma, or, there's all that sensibility. What are people talking about? What do we mean by that? Like, what is that really driving?
So my students who are seniors in high school would say, they all talk about karma, and they say it goes around, comes around. Mm-hmm. It's a balance in the universe of forces. You reap what you sow. Mm-hmm. That's what they would say. Yeah.
So I think that's perfect, right? It's that sort of, you reap what you sow, and think what goes around comes around, and all of those sorts of things. So, okay. So we've got all these karmas, and so then what does that karma then therefore drive? What is implied then with karma? Like, what happens? Like, because you have an action, there's some sort of reaction. So what does karma then, in a certain sense, drive, or the theory of karma drive within, let's say, the Hindu, Buddhistic kind of philosophy? Any, like, what goes that
It's all
push?
Leela.
Selfless action. She draws selfless action, so good action.
So for the karma yoga, so the differentiating piece, what about reincarnation?
We're working out our past karmas.
Right.
We're working out our samskaras.
So can you, so like I had a conversation with my mom who believes in reincarnation, but she wasn't quite sure about karma. And I'm like,
That's very strange. How
yeah,
can
I'm like,
you
I
have
don't
one
think
but
it
not
works
the other?
like that, Mom. I love you, Mom. But I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like, those are intertwined very much. So then how do we differentiate? So that's what this first piece of paper, did you get one of the other
The
sheets?
notes? Yes.
Okay. So there's 3 types of karma that are going to be good to know and kind of understand. And again, this is this is a parallel to karma yoga, but it's okay because it's just about learning, right? So the Prarabdha, and I apologize, I had to write on it because it looked really good on my screen, and then I printed 20 copies of it and then realized that it didn't print that great. So it's like, oh my God. So Prarabdha, right? So you'll hear that again. Oh, that's my Prarabdha, right? It's that fatalistic. You'll hear people say that. Oh, it's my destiny, right? So that's sort of the critique of the theory of karma by, let's say, the Westerners who came into India. And they're like, well, it makes all these Indians just these passive people that don't want to do anything because, well, it's my karma. It's my Prarabdha. So the Prarabdha karma is the karma that is taking place in our birth right now. So it's the current karma that we're dealing with that set the stage for us being in this body with our family, with our circumstances. And that we can't really change. So the example that's used often to describe your Prarabdha is that once the arrow is released from the bow, the arrow is going to go where the arrow goes, right? And so in that sense, even if you got enlightened, even if you woke up and you became liberated in this life, because people will say, oh, these rishis or these like swamis, they're supposedly enlightened, so then why aren't they basically dead? Like, why didn't they just give up the body and say, okay, peace out, I'm out of here? And because the theory is that Prarabdha karma of their body still exists. So they still have to deal with it, even though they maybe aren't creating new karmas. Okay? So the Prarabdha karma is the karma that is trajectorying our current life. Then Agami karma is the karma that we're creating. And so in a certain sense, and we'll get into this is where we're dealing with karma yoga. The idea is that action, good or bad, binds us. And so the Agami karma is the karma that we're accumulating for the next time, for our next birth, for the future. Now it may come into play this lifetime as well somewhat. I do something bad now, I can still reap bad things now, so that would be my Agami karma. And then if it's enough, then it may spill over into my next birth and become my Prarabdha for the next birth, in a sense. And so then the storehouse, so to speak, that we call like a bag, I think was the translation, is the Sanchitta. The Sanchitta karma is sort of that total accumulation of all of your karmas. And so maybe in this birth I'm working out X, Y, and Z, but I still have A, B, and C that I still is in my karmic sort of bank account. And maybe my next birth I'm going to have to deal with A, B, and C, right? And that's stored in the Sanchitta. Okay, so it's more complicated in a certain sense, and so this is where that's why it's important to kind of have a base of this to understand, so that way when we're dealing with karma yoga, we can kind of like it makes sense. So if you look at the things, and again, now we'll sort of use that to sort of go into the karma yoga. So we talked about. Hello, welcome. The Prarabdha we already talked about. So how do we address this? How do we fix it? And again, I'm trying to just give you guys terminology, right? So the theory of karma is not fatalism. The theory of karma is not passive destiny. The beauty of the theory of karma, the way that this was understood by these rishis, is it kind of reconciles the dilemma, that kind of philosophical puzzle of free will versus destiny. Because how do you reconcile those two things? And Western philosophy has always struggled with that because they don't have this sort of backdrop where they can kind of make it make sense. So, so Purushartha, Purush, right, from Purusha, kind of meaning the self, And then artha. Artha is your accomplishment, achievement, activity. It's like one of the goals in Hindu life, right? There's kama, dharma, artha, moksha, right? Not in that order, but so that's your self-effort, and that's what we're talking about here. And so this nice quote that I like is, what we meet in life is destiny, or our prarabdha. How we meet it in life is the purushartha, right? And so the example that, and again, I'm going somewhere with this to kind of fold into karma yoga, is if the river flows at 10 miles an hour downriver, right? If we do nothing and we flow with the river, we'll go at 10 miles an hour. If we put a motor on ourselves, or we go into a boat and we put it at 5 miles an hour and I'm going in the direction of the river, I'm now at 15 miles an hour, or if I'm going upriver, I'm at 5. So that's the interplay of the karma with the self-effort. So that self-effort becomes really, really important to modify kind of the outcome of our futures. Okay? So I just kind of keep that in mind, because then that starts to make, makes the karma yoga start to make a little bit more sense in terms of why we need to do what we need to do. So if we start, so let's then jump into the chapter then. So the first 20 verses are basically about karma yoga. And then the second part of it, from verse 21, is going to talk about kind of idealized life. And then the third part, from 36 until the end, is about anger and desire and kind of how that affects us. So we'll try to make sure that we can kind of hit all three of those. So I don't want this just to be me talking the whole time, but so any thoughts on sort of the beginning, few verses of the chapter?
I have a question on where it says that Arjuna changed the direction altogether.
What verse are you referring to?
Maybe not in the verse, but in the introduction, where say that Arjuna continued to worry, and then he changed the direction altogether in this chapter.
I think what it is that Arjuna finally, if you remember towards the end of last chapter, Krishna started telling him who he was. He didn't show him, he hasn't done the big Vishwarupa yet or any of that. But I think he's kind of gotten Arjuna out of his tizzy fit that he was having, where now Arjuna was ready to listen, right? So it was just that those first couple of chapters, where Arjuna was spinning out, and he finally was like, come on, man, snap out of it. And I think 3 is the beginning where now Arjuna is finally receptive to hearing. Where now he still has lots of resistance. I mean, this is why he asked the same dumb question over and over and over, because he's hard-headed like us, and so we need repetition. And so in a sense, this is why the first 2 things. Arjuna's like, well, you're saying that knowledge is better than action, but you're telling me to do action? I don't understand, which is greater? Just tell me what to do. How many of you sat there at your puja altars or praying, or you're like, I don't know, God, just tell me what to do. I'll do it. I don't care. It's this, or this. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? I just want to do that. So I think Arjuna is like, just tell me what to do, man. But so the question is then, and so this is where you guys, pop in, because this is the big picture view of this chapter, really, well, largely the Gita, is why is Krishna telling Arjuna to do action, and why isn't he telling him to do knowledge?
I think because of Arjuna's particular karma and dharma of being a warrior caste and a prince, that is not meant to be like, all right, go meditate in the mountains and think about until you understand it.
Right.
Instead, it's no, that's not how you're going to work this out. You're going to work it out through action and experience.
Right.
And that is why we're not even going to talk about jnana yoga right now. We're just going to focus on the action, because you said, tell me what to do. We're going to do is what we're going to do.
Right. That's exactly right. Right. So it's kind of like, it's one of those things, if you have to ask, then you're not ready, in that sense. So the thought is that we all need, we'll go into it, we all need to act all the time. Most of us are not at the point where we can live a contemplative life. We're going to sit there and meditate all day. or study the scriptures, or live that sort of ascetic sannyasi type life. Most of us, and this is, if you think about it now, again, if we want to look at it as a piece of literature and not just as scripture in that sense, this is sort of geared for the common man, right? If you think about it, the Upanishads were already around. It was all written. There was really no need for this. Why was this story written and all these Upanishad sort of pieces put into the greater context of this Mahabharata story?
Just tell me what to do.
Well, because people aren't going to read the Upanishads,
Yeah.
right? Most people, most of us who are just trying to just get through life, right, aren't ready for that. And so that's why there's so much emphasis on doing karma yoga. Because the thought is that karma yoga in certain ways is preparatory for the other things. It starts to purify us for the things that are to come. And when you're ready for that, you'll know it, because you don't have to ask anymore. You'll just know it. It'll just be like innate in that way.
Yeah, and it is most practical because every day we are exposed to so many things.
Right.
That just directly jumping to the discipline of knowledge, it's very tough.
Right.
We can begin with the discipline of action.
Right. Because we can all understand that.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why this is so much emphasized, because it's really more applicable to the majority of people or householders or things like that. Not exclusively, but majority, right? So Krishna says in kind of, three, well, I made these two paths, right? But you kind of ideally, now there is a time, so that's the other thing too, is that these paths eventually converge. And that's one of the things for me, like that's kind of, back when I first was reading this, or a lot of times when we're first reading this book, or it's getting spoken about, it's spoken about as if they're very separate things, right? Well, I'm a karma yogi and I'm just going to do my karma yoga, or I'm a bhakti yogi and I'm going to go sing and dance around at the Krishna temple, or I'm a yani and I'm just going to meditate and read scriptures all day, as if they're these completely different silos. But as you start to sort of go up, they start to get, and they merge and merge and merge. So I think we have to kind of keep that in mind, is that early on, maybe, yes, we're artificially somewhat sort of making them as very distinct pathways, but eventually they come together at the end. And this is why so he says, right? So one who shirks action does not attain freedom, right? So Arjuna was like, I want to go to the woods. I don't want to fight the fight, right? Or us, I don't want to fight the spiritual battle. I'm tired, right? And you don't have to, but you're not going to get the freedom, right? No one can gain perfection by abstaining from work. And indeed, no one rests for a minute. All creatures are driven to action by their own nature, right? So we have no choice, whether we want it or not. We're here, right? So in that sense, eventually they will, you need the intelligent action to drive, or you need the intelligent, like the knowledge to drive your action, but you need the action to drive knowledge. Like they kind of yin and yang with each other in a way, right? Any thoughts so far? No? Okay. So then the other thing then, so a lot of this is about purifying your sort of your internal, like your internal thought process. So if you go back to your notes, again, like I said, I just try to give you little extras. Those who abstain from action on verse 6, while allowing the mind to dwell on sense pleasures, cannot be called sincere. Or in most of the translations, it says hypocrites. But they excel who control their senses through the mind, using them for selfless service. So, and you look at those notes, I just wanted to sort of give you, this is from a book called Viveka Chudamani, it's Shankaracharya. And these are very famous things. So if you look down at the bottom, this Shamavi, Shakta, Sampati, the 6 virtues, Sama and Dhamma are those 2 that he's talking about. So Sama is the internal control, and then Dhamma is the external control. So let's say I decide I want to be a Swami, but I'm still not ready for that, and I go and I live in an ashram, but all day long I'm meditating and I'm thinking about, sensual things, then it's really kind of pointless, right? And yeah, maybe I'm wearing orange robes, but internally I'm not there, right? So that's why he's saying like, hey, that's kind of being a hypocrite. So anyway, and then if we go to 8 then, and it says fulfill. So these are like kind of famous quotes, right? So 4 is very famous. 8 is also, I think, very famous. Fulfill all your duties, for action is better than inaction. Even to maintain your body, you're obliged to act. Okay. Now, so one of you, I think one of you mentioned like it's your like dharma, right? Like that karma was sort of your duty was the translation. So if we look at that, if you go back again to the printout that I gave you, up at the top of the back of the page, it says karma types. Okay, so this 1 and 8 is kind of known as the niyatam karma. This is like the Lord's command, more or less. And so that is your obligatory duties or actions related to what stage you are in life, right? So in that sense, that definition would potentially make sense. Okay.
So here's my question on that.
Yeah.
Perform a prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. That's what I have on text in my translation.
Mm-hmm.
So the question here would be, how do you know what your prescribed duty is? So how do you actually know or determine what your prescribed duty is? And is there really any correlation between the social construction of caste versus your actual intended duty by the Lord?
Yeah.
I like that
I do feel
question.
like there might be some just very, very fundamental duties that you exist within. Like, for example, if you are a daughter, there is some sense of duty there, perhaps. Or if you are a mother, then there is a duty, perhaps.
Part of our specific fun dharma of being an American is there is a lot of not clearness to it. That's part of the deal. And so not having a distinct caste is part of the karma you have to work with.
Yeah, I would say, so I think it depends on how you're defining caste. Because if you look at, if you look at, for example, at least theoretically, like the Manusmriti, okay, which is with the Dharma Shastras, the Manusmriti, yes?
No.
Okay, so Manusmriti is sort of the really super duper ancient book of like laws and codes and societal kind of regulation.
Right.
Okay, so that's the basis of caste. Okay, now that caste system of Shudra and Brahmana and Kshatriya and all that was created at a certain time and then in a certain sense I think evolved and abused, right? And that's kind of what Gandhi was saying, that's what all these kind of more modern day reformers have made. So but was the initial intention of caste meant to be sort of family lines? Because I'm a Southern, I'm a Tamil Brahmin, right? So therefore I'm better than everybody because I'm a Tamilian Brahmin and we're like the cream of the crop in terms of spiritual guys, right? But what if you're born into a family of Tamil Brahmins and they're sort of very holy, but you're not, right? And so, are you really a Brahmin? Or let's say you take like someone like, I'm not trying to put myself or say anything about me, but I'm a white guy. I'm sitting here teaching a karma yoga class. Am I a Kshatriya? Am I a Shudra? Am I acting more like a Brahmin? Right? So the point being that your caste, I think, is going to be more so ideally more about who you are and the nature of your personality.
So I will contest this, and the reason is regularly throughout this text we see all the time Ajna and Kshatriya. There is really no disentangling prescribed duty Ajna and Kshatriya.
Right.
Now, how can there be a Kshatriya who is not a king, or who did not descend from a noble family line? If you are a farmer, how can you innately have some innate personality that I am a Kshatriya? Because that concept doesn't make sense without inheritance.
Well, look at the example of Karan, right? When he grew up, he didn't know who he was, but he had the Kshatriya personality. And even Parshuram, his guru, said, hey, you're not Brahman, you're Kshatriya, based on his character, not because of his inheritance.
So yeah, I see your point with Arjuna, and I think, we're talking about the duty, and that's in the context of this text, but there's no Kshatriyas running around right now, right? There's no Raja Rishis running around right now. There's there's none of that. So that concept of where we're getting locked into certain castes is in a certain sense dated, right? And so I think from that point of view, it's more important than to assess your own sense of what's your swadharma, right? Your duty, right? Within the context of your life. Now, how do you determine what your dharma and your karma is? Only you know that. That's where you have to sort of do the inner work, right? To sort of determine, okay, this is what I'm naturally called to. This is what I'm naturally repelled by. This is what I'm naturally attracted to. Because your karma, right, is driving you or drove you to a certain set of circumstances in this birth.
Okay, so again, I would go back to the text on this, and I actually don't think that's accurate. And text 39 here, my translation says, "Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire."
Okay.
So if what you're saying is that you innately know what your duty is, right? You also apparently, according to text 39, have this innate lust covering, right? So how do you tell which is which? How do you know what you innately desire versus what is, according to this, lust?
So, I mean, I think this is the process of doing the introspection where yes, we're all covered because this is talking about identification with the outer coverings that are made by the Prakriti, right? Like the Sattva Guna, the Raja Guna, all that stuff, right? So you're only going to know that as you sort of, this is where you have to do meditation. This is where you have to do introspection to cut through those things. Now, since you've used that specific quote or verse, the typical kind of translation of that particular verse is saying, look, depending on how thick your ignorance is and based on which sort of guna, right? So if you have a sattvic sort of disposition, it's still not the highest. So that's the fire covered by smoke. The mirror obscured by dust is sort of considered the rajasic sort of desires and things like that. And then the embryo in the womb is the more deeply tamasic things. So these things are going to cover, yes, to an extent, our knowing of our highest self. But so then you could say, well, okay, maybe I don't necessarily know what is my highest dharma or duty because I'm in ignorance. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Right. But so then you say, well, then the question becomes, how do I remove my ignorance?
So again, we go back to the Arjuna's argument of why don't I just go in forest?
Right, but he's not ready for it. So what so we were getting to this, but the whole point of doing karma yoga, in a certain sense, is to scrub the dirt off of or to scrub the ignorance off of yourself internally. Because by doing karma yoga, it's in a certain sense preparatory, we practice, and it purifies us, in theory, right? So as we get more pure, then we can sort of then sense more and more of that inner sort of, that higher nature, that higher truth in us, and it makes it more clear for us to know which direction we're supposed to go. So that's the thought between, so karma yoga is really two things. One, it's to scrub old sort of dirt off of us, so to speak, like if it's obscuring our light. And the second part is to not create more dirt for future. Okay. To make it a very rough kind of answer.
Okay.
So yes, if we're deeply in ignorance, we may not know.
And we're just adding more dirt to the mirror.
So that's why karma yoga is sort of the first thing that was dealt with in the Gita before we start thinking about meditation and doing all of these more high abstract things, because I don't know necessarily what I need to do. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my truth is. I don't know any of that stuff. How the heck am I supposed to know? And it's not always easy. No one's saying it's easy, but this is saying that, look, at least if you can do this, you can do selfless work. You can help others. You can try to renounce the fruits of the action in the sense of where you are not identifying yourself so strongly with your body, your mind, your intellect, right? That little by little by little, we're going to scrub the sort of the perennial, sort of the proverbial dirt off of the coverings of our soul, so to speak. And eventually then that light shines more and more brightly. and then it becomes easier. But yes, when you're in the deepest, it's kind of like when you're in deep ignorance, it's hard to break out of ignorance.
Okay, so this is very interesting that you said that. And I will bring up back, I think in chapter 1 or 2,
Okay.
We remember that Arjuna was, originally his complaint was about, I'm about to kill my family, right? Or I'm about to kill my friends, right? So you can draw a parallel between that and what you've just described as selfless work. Is that not also a material concern having to do with other people, right? So Arjuna is very convenient. He has Krishna right next to him, like telling him, this is my word, right? This is the word of the Lord. This is what you have to do. We, I'm assuming we don't have that, right? Unless anyone,
So I can try to simplify it. So where you're going is very specific, and you're like trying to get to the answer, which is what we all try to do. We just want like the final answer. What is it that I need to do? But I think, and again, we also kind of separated things between good and bad a little bit. We say lust is automatically bad. I mean, in reality, there's no good or bad. I mean, killing your own family, is that good or bad? I mean, there's really no good or bad, right? You really need to take truly a step back, and you really don't know. I mean, we are all ignorant even today. We think we have advanced, whatever, but we are significantly ignorant even as of now. Not that we were ignorant back in the day when the caste system was there. We were ignorant back then. We're still. So it's a huge progression, right? There's like mountains to climb. And so we are going to be lost along the way. And there is no easy way to be like, I know this is the path, and I know I shouldn't kill my neighbor, whatever the cases may be, right? You do incremental changes. You could go, that's why the universe doesn't come in, or God doesn't come in and try to regulate what we do. Find your path, you will fumble, you will fail, and there's no right or wrong. This is what you know best to do. You learn from that experience, and then you go on to the next experience. So it's a very slow, that's why we have so many lifetimes to go through, and we have mountains of karma to evacuate eventually. And the universe doesn't care. It's like, take your time. God doesn't care. No? It could be like 1 billion years. I don't care. So we come back, and so it's a slow progression. We don't have to. Sometimes we need to be the leaf in the wind to some extent. That we're talking about inaction and action. So we're talking about we need to act. There's also, inaction also is not completely wrong. Like, be the leaf and be more observant, and then take this micro step and see what happens, right? And I think that the feedback loop is also significantly important. Like, a lot of times you go around doing things, you may be doing the right thing, right? You may be doing charity, you may be doing volunteer work. But I think the feedback loop is significant in all the little things you do, right? And I think that's where, so you don't have to know everything. You can't. It's not possible. We are ignorant still. But you do it incrementally and slowly, and then go about your way. Don't worry about good or bad. I did what best I could do. So.
Yes, and I think that there's never an either or. There's not that choice. Like, one can't happen for the other to happen. It's all happening at the same time, which is, I think, the beauty of this as a story, because as humans, that is how we process life, as a story. We all have our own story. This is Arjuna's story. We can relate to him as this ordinary character who shows up, who doesn't want to do something, it's difficult, and now he has this higher power in the form of Krishna that it's maybe within us all or near us all at all times, and helping us see that it is a constant moment-to-moment discovery of the internal and the external working together. So I am part of a caste system. I may have labels, and I have generations and generations and generations of, say, teachers or farmers or craftspeople that do impact who I am in this current lifetime. And I do also have my own personal moment of the arrow being going, with my current story. And that is where we find Arjuna in 3, is Krishna saying, yes, you are both of these things all the time. So it's, so. And it's a beautiful story.
Also, the context of Mahabharata.
Yes, a little bit.
So I think he's called upon to do his duty to establish justice again. Because that Mahabharata wouldn't have happened if Duryodhan would have agreed to give villages to Pandavas. So I think he's in a dilemma, but he's called upon by Krishna, who is actually an avatar of Vishnu. And Vishnu's main job as a god is to maintain a balance in the world.
Right, but Krishna tells him, right? Like he tells him this is what you have to do. I think
Yeah,
between
because
that and the rest of
Krishna
our
knows
lives-
everything, right? He knows what Duryodhan has done. You know, like he's trying
Right,
to
but
establish
we-
great
what I'm
justice.
saying, I agree with you. What I'm saying is we don't have a Krishna next to us to tell us this is what you have to do.
We
I'm
do
wondering if
actually.
we do. I'm wondering if we all find ourselves
We
right
do,
here
it's
in this
just we're
meeting
next to each
together
other.
It's like
as like a beautiful combination of our internal and our external duties to the world. Like I'm definitely sitting here, driven by my internal desire for some things, and also the application of what I'm learning in order to then act in the world in a certain way. So like right here, I wonder if we're all here with some sense of Arjuna and Krishna at the same time, like right within this.
That's like
I
your
would
moral-
say, I would argue, we do have Krishna right next to us. That's who is sitting right next to you. We are Krishna and we are Arjuna. You do have a Krishna if you're listening.
Okay.
It's like
Yep.
moral righteousness, you know, morality.
Every moment presents
Conscious.
you opportunities to listen for what is that right thing for your role in this moment, and you really don't know. And you can choose to listen and have that quiet down what my internal selfish desire for what I want to happen in this moment. That's the stuff obscuring things, and I'm not actually listening to what I actually need to do. And so the more that I practice moment to moment, it's active, it's experiential, moment to moment, quiet down and listen and respond rather than react.
Which is the desire and the anger.
Yes.
The desire, I want this to happen. The anger, I don't want this to happen. Instead, just
Quiet down, listen, and
what
then
is
respond.
happening.
I guess you're obsessed with Krishna being around, but either he's around or not around, it doesn't matter. I mean, you are a divine entity yourself. You don't need Krishna. Krishna doesn't need you. You don't. I mean, obviously it's a Lord. We look up, we pray. The Lord doesn't say keep praying to me, even though there could be rituals and all kinds of things. You decide your destiny. That's how this creation is made. This creation is not made where you look at the Lord and then you follow the path and that's the only way. No, the creation is made where you are your own destiny. Right?
Active.
Yeah.
It's active creation.
Yeah. And if you understand Hindi, I highly recommend you should watch Vishnu Puran. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
Highly recommend.
I mean, I think we should not forget the context here that Arjuna is already at war. He has to fight,
Yes.
and that is what Krishna is trying to tell. When you have to do something, you cannot run away from it, just because you don't want to. So, essentially, for us, how it translates right now is you have something that you have to do. In that, it doesn't matter. You want to do it, you like to do it, you don't like to do it. It has to be done by you. You cannot just walk away from it saying, I'm not going to do it. So that inner consciousness is what Krishna's saying, asking you to find for yourself.
That makes actually a lot of sense.
I really like that you mentioned it that way, and I think of a really practical example is if someone, the trash needs to be taken out. That's a very practical thing. No one wants to take out the trash. It's an unpleasant thing. It has all of the unpleasant sensory perception things of it. What is your spirit in taking out the trash? Are you doing it out of, God, I hate doing this? Or are you doing it as a sense of duty and a sense of this is the right thing and the thing that needs to be done? What spirit are you doing it?
Turn your vote.
I'll tell my kiddo that the
right?
next time.
Y'all are awesome.
So, and again, so I think the other thing, so that when very good, thank you. So if we look, right, so this is why I think, again, this is the fact that we're in ignorance, it's how do we break out of our ignorance? What is the, again, it's the vicious circle. I'm ignorant, so therefore I don't know, but because I don't know, I continue to be ignorant, and around I go. So how do I break out of that vicious circle? And that, I think, is in many ways why this is the first thing to do. Because I know that I can perform action. I can know where he's saying things, like, for example, on, let's say, verse 19. It's where it says, again in this translation, strive constantly to serve, the welfare of the world, devotion to selfless work, by devotion to selfless work, one attains the supreme goal in life. Do your work with the welfare of others always in mind. It is by such work that Janaka attained perfection, and then others too have followed this path. So, by doing that selfless work, and then what that does is, again, it in a certain sense, it scrubs that ignorance off of us. And so then as the ignorance gets scrubbed away little by little by little by little, then I think it becomes easier for us to hear the voice of God in our conscience within us. And so then we make better decisions because now we're hearing that better voice. But we've got to start somewhere, right? And so that's what I was saying kind of at the beginning, that the karma yoga is sort of a beginning thing in a certain sense, but then at the end it's also very important, but you're doing it now from a sense of non-doership, because you're no longer identifying yourself with the envelopes, right? I mean, at that highest level, it's just you do what needs to be done because it needs to be done. It's spontaneous, right? And that's why this was what they talk about, like in the next section. But so Janaka, right? Janaka was the Raja Rishi, right? He was the king, the wise king, right? With what was it? With not Ashtavar, was it Ashtavart? Was the guy was bent in 8-step Ashtavarta Gita, I think, or I think it was Janaka that he was teaching, if I remember right. Anyway,
if I make one quick. So the way I try to look at it is, I mean, one way is to look at it is, yes, we are all ignorant. I made that point earlier. But another way to look at it is that there's infinite truth, and I have the hardest time trying to understand how can truth to be infinite. And so it's more so, ignorance is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is like, yeah, we are all enlightened, we know a lot of things, but then there's more truth, more layers to the truth that we know. And even so, when you take somebody like Krishna or whatever God you want to take, it could be Buddha or Jesus, whatever, right? So they have a level of truth, and they are not done yet. So one of the criteria that we always think is, we need to attain them or get close to them, or maybe sometimes we feel we can never attain them. That's, again, a flawed way of thinking. But it's just every experience builds on the truth we already have to a higher level of truth. So it's not necessarily ignorance, because it's just we just understand it better and better and better. And it's very much possible that you will supersede Krishna and know more than him. Not like it's a competition, not like we're trying to be better than him, but there's no a goalpost that is drawn and they are sitting over there and you're all the way in the bottom, just looking up. It doesn't work like that. It's just, and so Krishna and Jesus can learn from you too. You have experience that they have not encountered in their eons of life, right? And so it goes both ways, and it's kind of hard to understand. It almost feels like blasphemous to say that, hey, they're going to learn from me. And it also feels like kind of arrogant, but it's none of those things, right? Because we're all part of the creation. So it's just that higher level of truth that we need to get to, and all of us are striving. And that's why kind of oneness comes into play, where every one of us. So one way for you to answer a question, most of the times I answer which is the right direction to go, is that one kind of mantra that I follow is that to do the oneness approach, am I inclusive of everybody and everybody's feelings? Usually that gives an easy way. Usually that gives an answer on how I should proceed in a situation. So that's a trick I use personally. It's like, what do I do here? It's like, which is the most inclusive, which benefits the most people, which is not just in my favor, but for everybody's favor.
So you bring a good point of including other people's feelings. But what if, your ideas or your principles, or you think that that's too much? So where do you find the balance between
Absolutely.
that and living up to other people's expectations?
That's where the feedback loop comes in. So you think, we are obviously not the smartest people in some sense. So you think this is the right approach, that's the best you can do. We all are doing our best, right? Every minute or every day we're doing the best we can. It's not right all the time, or we don't even know what right is per se, right? So you get into the feedback loop and observe, Oprah gave away, what did she do? She gave away some Chromebooks to everybody. That was a good gesture, but most people didn't have internet. And so, it's a simple example, a lame example even, but it kind of proves the point that you do what you think is the best, but then you get the feedback and then you get better at it. Next time you don't give Chromebooks, find out if they have internet for it, or give an alternate, right? So it doesn't have to be right, but where you come from is more important than what really happens.
I actually have a really, a mantra I use almost every day. I tell a lot of people in my work is, we do the best we can, and that's the best we can do. And then when we know better, we do better. That's it. That's all we can do.
And sometimes, though, we know better, but we don't do better. But wherever we are in the moment, however we show up, that is where we are, and
it's an opportunity.
And sometimes we still don't do better. So I try to tell my students, because we program students in the United States to see knowledge or learning as you know it or you don't know it, or you know it at this level, and there's almost as you can there's a limit to it of the knowledge. And the goal is to gain it. And so then we can divide people up. But I like to think of what we're doing here as unfolding infinite layers of expansion, in a sense, like an forever blooming flower. At what point is it done or not done, or perfect or not perfect? It still continues to be larger and larger.
We can have a striving for perfection in knowledge that we will never actually realistically be perfect. But the striving, the constant improvement is what I'm focused on.
So I actually, so it's very interesting that the angle that we've taken is that, it's about us following our, kind of personal sense of right? So we'll sort of figure out as we go, what is the right thing to do, what is the word of Krishna. Okay, so I'll point you to text 16. And text 16, my translation of it reads, "My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. Such a person lives in vain." So I think in text 16, I think Krishna is actually directly addressing the question I've asked of, how do we know what the right thing to do is, right? Because he is pretty clearly saying that if you don't follow the cycle of sacrifice in the Vedas, right? If you don't follow the Vedas, then you're not going to scrub any dirt off the mirror, right? You are still going to be impure. So I think text 16 is very strong evidence that it is actually not sufficient for us to just follow our own internal compass. I think that's a Western production that we've added onto the actual text. And what Krishna is actually saying here is that no, you can't know. It's Maya, right? And because you can't know, you have to just follow the scripture, which is the word of God. And you can even look further into this and think about what is other supporting evidence. You can think about terrorism, right? Clearly there are some people out there who think that God commands me to murder a lot of people, and that's not that. I think we can all agree that's not that cannot be the command of Krishna, right? Krishna cannot have told somebody that I should murder some people, right? That just doesn't no.
It could be.
I mean, he's telling Arjuna he probably needs to.
Yeah.
So if in the event, so in the case of we have 9/11, right? So is that an example of Krishna telling whoever did that to you have to do this, or is it an example of them falling to Maya, where they think they are reaching enlightenment or think they are working towards the right thing, but because they haven't followed the Vedas or they haven't followed the scriptures, they're not really making progress at all, right? Well, it's kind of the example of the.
We are also assuming that. We are assuming, that was wrong in the design.
So is it right, is what I'm asking.
How do we know? We don't know.
So
that's
the idea of right. So right now in this group, you're you're being this amazing person for all of us that is sending us, but I feel like you are acting out of a sense of duty, like an honest, true duty, and what you're doing is creating this whole magic for everyone here. And then I feel like you have maybe this sense of duty that brings you into a very clear explanation, you're very analytical, and you're asking us to look deeper and make sure that we are on track, and you're doing this for us, and then you're clarifying some things for us, and then you're asking the beautiful question that pertains for us, and then you're adding it's such an amazing thing that second calling to speak out and what I tell my students, to show up for life, we all are doing right now, just to show up.
We are understanding the laws right now so that we can apply them. This is the process of understanding the Vedas. This is how you'd be able to understand what is right and wrong through the process. Kind of like how science isn't is this true? Did we prove it? Well, we have some evidence, but you can't really prove anything in science, can you? You can only give it supporting evidence. And then when you have contrary evidence, then you have to take that into account as well. And you may have a completely wrong understanding, and through the process, you refute yourself. You should always be open to that refutation as well. And never assume you know it. And I think using this sort of lens of supporting evidence, not supporting evidence, this is also evidence. You may also take it, and hopefully you do. Or, if you have another refutation, would love to hear it, because I love refutation.
So I mean, the biggest reputation I have for this is certainly, we have seen consistently throughout the Gita, Maya, right? The idea that sensory inputs are illusions. And I'm also more drawn to this because just before the Gita, I was reading the Brahma Sutra, which was all about Brahman, right? The idea that we can disconnect from the outside world and reconnect with the Brahman, which is the true, supreme, ever-living entity. So that's kind of a different perspective, right? And actually, even in the Gita, it kind of does go back and forth and argues that, there are some parts which can be taken as the Brahman is only one possible end. You can go even higher to Krishna, right? So coming from that sort of angle, right, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, how do we really know that this interaction that we are having right now, I mean, what you've just argued is that this is evidence, right? What I'm arguing is this is not evidence because it's Maya, right? How do we know it's not Maya?
So you're basically denouncing the very fact we exist, and the purpose of physical existence is, you're saying it's completely irrelevant.
Well,
it cannot be. It cannot be, right?
What is Maya?
Illusion.
Usually translated as illusion. So when he's talking about the Brahma Sutras, or when you're talking about the concept of what's called Brahman, okay? So Brahman is, in this sort of philosophy, is the sort of the absolute highest absolute God. We'll say God without being, it's not an embodied God, okay? It's the undercurrent of consciousness that underlies the entire universe, okay? It's commonly described as a pure Sat, which is eternal or truth or unchanging, Chit, which is consciousness or awareness, and then Ananda, which is bliss. So it's this sort of, it's the underlying sort of electricity, so to speak, that is sort of the underlying current of the universe. And so in that sense, so Maya comes in where the thought is, under this sort of particular philosophy, that they believe that Brahman is really the only true thing, and everything is a superimposition onto that true thing. So the example that is used often is the concept of the rope and the snake. Okay, that's very commonly used to explain it. So that if I'm in the dark, and I don't know if we've talked about this, if I'm in the dark and I step on a big thick rope, and for the moment, I'm outside, and then we're in Central Texas, and I think it's a snake, and I'm terrified of snakes. I'm going to behave in a particular way because I'm under the influence of snakeness, and so therefore I'm afraid, right? And then I come into the house, you're there, I'm like, dude, you have a big snake in your backyard. I'm like, oh, there's no snakes in my backyard. So what I'm right now is I'm afraid of the snake. I'm under the influence of Maya, the illusion of the snake. And then what happens is that you take me in the backyard with the flashlight, shine the flashlight onto the snake, onto what's actually the rope. And suddenly I see that it was a rope and not the snake. And so in an instant, I'm no longer under Maya. Because now my ignorance of the true nature of that has been dispelled. And so now I see the rope for what it is, and I no longer believe it's a snake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So in that sense, under that sort of sensibility, Brahman is sort of the underlying current of everything, but it's unaffected. So Brahman is sort of stands unaffected, again, the way the sun is unaffected. I could be proposing to my wife under the same sun that someone is murdering someone under. And the sun gives its light equally to both. But it's detached, it's unaffected by either, right? So that's sort of the highest level of sort of awareness, I guess, or the cosmic consciousness, or whatever word you want to call it. Now, this, you're reading the ISKCON, you have the ISKCON version, right?
Copy,
yeah.
Yes.
So the copy of the Bhagavad Gita that he has is it's the ones that's read by the Hare Krishna groups.
Yes.
And so under their sort of lineage, their tutelage, their whatever, they feel that actually, and they'll find quotes from different scriptures where they'll say Krishna is actually higher than Brahman, and that they call the people who believe in the Brahman as the kind of the underlying consciousness, they call them Mayavadis, meaning like they believe that like they're kind of almost the Maya is sort of the highest thing, like Brahman and Maya, they talk about that, whereas these guys believe that Krishna is actually higher than that. And so it's a philosophical argument, basically, that the different sort of schools in Indian philosophy will have back and forth with each other.
Oh, okay. So I actually want to go back to your point, because I think it's a really interesting, it's an interesting criticism. I don't think it's supported by the scripture or the text that, you know, none of you exist, right? I don't think that's supported. What I do think could be supported is that you all exist but are also under the influence of Maya, just like I am also under the influence of Maya,
Sure.
right? And so part of what I've gotten from the Gita is that this is the word of a, you know, fully maximally enlightened person, Krishna, right? Who is directly telling us, and this has been passed down through the generations, like this is the truth, right? He is telling us, and the idea is this is what we can trust, the scripture, because it comes from God. As opposed to everyone else and their personal experiences, which are heavily influenced by Maya. How do you know that your moral compass is not influenced by Maya? How do you know that your feelings about right and wrong are not influenced by Maya? What we have here is the word of God in the form of scripture. So according to the ISKCON people, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is the law.
So if there was an atheist among us, right? He or she is also progressing in this life, and they are also going to be enlightened without believing in God one bit, on any God. Or there could be a Catholic here, there could be anybody from any religion or no religion, or an agnostic person. That's not how this works. It's not supposed to only work for believers. You know, some religions would say only believers will get there, but that's not how, at least Hinduism works as far as I understand, and that's not how it's supposed to work. You do not have to be a believer.
Has anybody heard of Maya being translated as transitory?
Yes, I have also heard that one.
That helps me more than the illusion, because I can understand this body is transitory. It's not, the divine within is absolute or permanent, but the body, earth, is eventually going to go away. Everything is transitory, is my understanding in Maya.
Right.
And Brahman is an absolute that is there forever.
Right, and that's where they get into Sat versus Asat. Sat meaning, I mean, you'll see that it's sort of the root of the word Satya, which is usually translated as truth, right? But in the context of Sat versus Asat, it's more in the sense that it is permanent versus impermanent. So it's not that we don't necessarily exist, because we do. It's more so that we are impermanent. There's an impermanence to us that, and so there, to the Maya, our attachment to our body, mind, intellect, and all that. But the highest truth in us, the Atman, right, which is the same as Brahman, that's the only sort of Sat part of us in that sense, and everything outside of that is a projection. So that's kind of I think the way that I kind of look at it. But when we're looking at values and morals, and to take your point of the 9/11 hijackers, or you take an Islamist extremist, or let's not pick on a Christian extremist. It could be. Let's not make it about any one particular religion. If they're sitting there and killing, and they're using verses in the Quran, and they're just as justified in their mind killing people, because if I do jihad, then I go to heaven and I have my celestial time and all that other good stuff. And then the Hindus are saying, well, we've got the Gita and we've got Krishna telling Arjuna to do the same thing, and now we have Pakistan and India going at it, right? Or whatever. But I think that to me, the way that I reconcile it is the concept of the Sanatana Dharma, right? And that to me is the beauty of the Hindu philosophy, where there are those eternal values, love, truth, righteousness, these sorts of things that are going to be that transcend the sort of the nitpicky details of some of the scriptural texts that have been translated over the years. And so from that point of view, I think we know, if you listen to your conscience, you know. Now maybe we're not at the highest level, and maybe because it's clouded by a certain degree of ignorance, we're not hearing the voice of Krishna or consciousness or whatever at its highest. And so hence, study of the scriptures, right? Swadhyaya, right? These kinds of things are important for us. Doing karma, doing yama niyama type things, like if we want to look at the Yoga Sutras, right? These are the things that we can do to cleanse ourselves so that we can better hear that higher conscience within our hearts, that I think then are going to somewhat transcend some of the little particulars of this script versus this or this thing. And that is, I'm as part of this, I'm reading the ISKCON Gita along with it, and I'm reading it along with Kashmiri Shaivism translation, so they have a slightly different twist on it. Obviously the Advaita version of it, the Krishna version of it, or the ISKCON version of it, their translation is very unique in how they interpret a lot of the scriptures. And I get why they say what they say, because they can very much find shlokas in there that say, hey, this, and this. So I 100% get it, where they're coming from. But, if it means anything, when you read almost any of these other translations, no one else is translating or interpreting it that way.
It's like you have like a cheat sheet. It's what we all have in our hands right now. This is a cheat sheet.
Yeah.
You don't need it. You can still play this game without this cheat sheet. It'll take you a little bit longer, but it's fine. It's still a game. I mean, the fun of it is sometimes it's better not to have this. Throw this away. So we just do our own thing. Well, and then
you can play the game with the game manual, or you can skip the tutorial. I don't care. You're gonna play the game.
Stream sometimes. And also karma, like when we talk about bad things that happen in the world, like terrorist attacks and people just doing terrible things, or is it true that like maybe with karma, it's not just us, all that, like the individual makes all of these karmic decisions for oneself and one's reincarnation, but as societies and as civilizations and as vast periods of time, we are also living out a karmic unfolding. So when we have terroristic organizations and religions that are what we would say not kind, or societies that are super peaceful or not, we are also all collectively adding to, depending on how we act on an individual level, but also on a societal level, we're participating in the unfolding in a vast way.
We have collective karma as well.
Yes, so when we have like a Holocaust or something, that is a part of what has been put into motion because of things that have...
And we're still dealing with that karma.
Yeah. We've got 30 minutes left, so I do want to just sort of keep us so that we can at least... So, I mean, this is great. I'm not trying to cut it. I just want to make sure that we try to at least sort of cover sort of just some of the things. And I think, so if we look at let's just kind of quickly, because like I said, I want to sort of stay on time. Yeah, do we want to take a quickie, like 21 through 35? It's called the Shrestha Achara, kind of the lifestyle model. Sometimes it gets called as. And this is where he's talking about how people, should sort of behave. Like even if we sort of, let's say we wake up, so to speak, to the highest truth, whatever that is, so we don't get lost in that discussion too much again. Do we then go and run off and go do things or not? Or do we stay and we continue to work, right? And so this is where Krishna is saying, right, so for example, in 21 in this translation, what the outstanding person does, others will try to do. The standards such people create will be followed by the whole world. And then he goes on and says, there's nothing for me to gain, but yet I still work. If I stopped working, then, the whole universe would basically, fall apart. So I think then if we want to look at some of those models, if we're in doubt of how should we behave, I think innately we can see, okay, if we have some of the more...
What would the outstanding person do?
What's that?
What would the outstanding person do? And then
well, yeah, do that. Right? I mean, so it's a teaching by example, or what is be the change you want to see in the world, to use the Gandhi bumper sticker, the bumper sticker kind of thing. So I think if we want the example of the rishis, if we wanted the example of sages and saints and these people who seem to have gotten at least as high as we can understand as they've gotten, how do they act? How do they behave? How do they, and I think then in a certain sense, it's kind of like there's this concept, I can't remember the name of it because it's still really new to me, but in Kashmiri Shaivism they talk a bit about this. It's sort of like you have to behave a certain way to become that way. So there's sort of like, so if I want to be compassionate, if I want like to be compassionate like God or whatever, I have to practice being compassionate. If I want to be patient like God, I have to practice patience. So there's this sort of this vicious circleness of it's almost reminding me of the kind of fake it till you make it kind of thought, right? That if we modeled ourselves in some ways on some of these enlightened souls, the Buddhas, the Krishnas, the Jesuses, whoever, I think that's going to take us pretty far along the journey, at least while we're still groping in the dark. Because we don't have the benefit of Krishna in our ear, we don't have the benefit of sitting at the feet of a guru. What are we supposed to do? I mean, that's, some of the sort of my internal critique of even starting this, right, is like, well, who am I, right? I'm not in some sort of guru shishya parampara where I've done stuff and I've been in ashrams and have been semi-initiated in India with swamis and stuff, but it's not like I'm, there's some guru shishya parampara, so who am I to start a Bhagavad Gita session, right? But here's the reality, we don't have those people around for us. And so the closest we can get is YouTube swamis and, studying scriptures and then trying to have a satsang so that we can get collective experience try to help us as we're groping on each of our individual journeys. So anyway, so that's kind of sort of in a certain sense a lot of what's covered in the sort of this middle section. Does anyone have any comments on that so far?
I like that he says in 25, just all work carefully guided by compassion.
Yeah.
That's kind of a...
Yeah, the ignorant work for their own profit, the wise work for the welfare of the world without thought for themselves. And then by abstaining from work, you'll confuse the ignorant, right, who are engrossed in their actions. So perform all your work carefully guided by compassion. And then here's, again, we talked about this a little bit last time, because then the question is, this is the one thing that's often confusing when people talk about doing karma yoga. Well, how is it that I'm not the doer? I'm doing it. How is it that I'm supposedly not the doer? Even if it's a good thing, how am I not the doer? How do I sort of even reconcile that philosophically? Right? So then, what do you guys say about that?
Like you let go of the want. Like as a teacher, I want them to learn this. I want them to do, it's more about I just show up with compassion and do what's called, I guess.
Yeah.
And I let go of
Okay.
And anger. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think a lot of that has to do, I think, very similar to that of your own selfish attachment and desires of the action. The I am the doer is also a bit of the ego part of the doing only happens because I'm doing it. It's almost like an ego-driven version of the action itself that we are unconsciously always doing all the time. And instead working on the action is the action. That is not me.
Like the Prakriti is acting on Prakriti, modes are acting on modes.
And that to me, that's the key. Like that when I finally sort of put those two things together, then it was like a big moment, like it made sense.
Repeat it I feel like repeat it just a little slower so I can just absorb it.
Modes are acting on modes. So the Prakriti, I don't know how can I say modes?
Just
modes, yeah.
So does everyone here know, we talked about Prakriti last time. Everyone knows
energy?
Prakriti?
No. What can we translate?
So Prakriti, really quick.
It's the transient part.
This philosophy is built on a philosophy that kind of one of the most ancient parts of Indian philosophy is called Samkhya. Samkhya philosophy sort of predates almost everything that you're going to talk about in these days. And within that, there's a model where sort of what we would think of that unattached God, and again, I'm oversimplifying it here, but just for simplicity's sake, is called the Purusha, okay? And then there's a second piece called Prakriti. So Prakriti is sort of, so they'll translate as like consciousness and nature. And you need the blend of consciousness and nature to come together in order for there to be a manifestation of universe. So I used to, when I was teaching at the Chinmaya mission many years ago, I would do this thing with the students where I'd have all these candles. I bought a ton of candles and they'd all have a candle. And I'd say, okay, you have a candle. The candle is the Prakriti. It's sort of the material manifestation. But there's no light. You need light. But I have matches, or I have a lighter, or whatever. So that is sort of the energy of consciousness. If I want the candle to burn, I need the mixture of Prakriti and Purusha together. They have to come together because Purusha without Prakriti, there's no manifestation. And Prakriti without Purusha doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so this is like what like people think is super cutting edge and brand new with like thought or intention into like material reality.
That's all. This Indian rishis figured this out thousands of years ago.
Right. But this is the idea.
Yes.
Like this is Prakriti.
Yes. Yeah. Where all the physicists are suddenly discovering, that the world, the universe is a holographic projection of consciousness, and the rishis were literally like talking about this like forever ago. We're just catching up. I mean, realistically, I mean, it's amazing what those guys figured out. It's truly incredible. I mean, truly. But anyway, so Prakriti is the mode, so it gets them broken down into three kind of modes: the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So Sattva is sort of like balanced, peaceful, kind of even. Rajas is very aggressive, active, kind of that. And Tamasic is more ignorant, dark, sort of lethargic. And so we're sort of in a sense like a color wheel, right? Like red, blue, yellow, where you can make infinite numbers of kind of colors using different combos of red, yellow, and blue. In a sense, the modes of nature are kind of Prakriti is sort of, that's my analogy, that's how it's made the manifold universe. And so then in the sense of non-doership, if we're then kind of relating to ourselves as the I am consciousness, the Atman at that highest level, then, which in a certain sense is sort of similar to the concept of Purusha. Okay, it gets a little tricky but with philosophy systems, but just basically, it's those modes of nature are affecting modes of nature. But me at the highest level is not doing it. Because me at the highest level is unaffected. Like that Brahman, because Atman is Brahman. Right? So when we start thinking about it that way, because you say, well, how can I do action but say that I'm not doing action? And the Buddhists say this too, right? They're like, well, it's actionless awareness. It's you just chop wood, carry water, like you mentioned last time. You're just in the isness of now.
There's
perennial no.
And inaction and inaction within action.
Yeah.
You can find it within both.
Yeah. Show up.
So I'm not the actor because I have to be then identifying myself internally as the I am. That's it. Like I am. Period. Full stop. Once I start putting this or that, I am this, I am that, I am this, anything that becomes the object and not the subject is no longer me.
Yeah. That's the I want or the I don't want.
Yeah, but that becomes then ego.
Right. So then that's this great
number
20.
Right. I am the doer.
A is great. Okay.
Because of our misidentification of our highest nature. And that's where we get bound.
So what are the three modes again? Like what are each of the modes?
Tamas, Rajas,
And what do they mean?
So tamas is like, well, I mean, it's inertia, darkness, ignorance, lethargy. Sattva is sort of purity, balance, clarity, and then Rajas is sort of activity, passion, that kind of stuff. So it's sort of earth, fire in a way, and then sort of ether or wind, and it's not exactly that, but I'm just trying to in that way. So, if you're very action oriented and you're go, 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 and you're this, you're kind of have a dominance of Rajas. If you're very lethargic and very, not inclined to do much, or you're very ignorant and have no interest in doing anything, you're dominant in Tamas. And then when you're sort of sitting there and you're reading the Bhagavad Gita and you're feeling a little bit more kind of ethereal and you're feeling light and good and balanced and you're kind of in that sort of sensibility, you're in Sattva. And so all of us are mixtures of all of those things, and that's going to ebb and flow as we go through our lives. It's not one singular thing, but we may have an overall dominance of one versus the other. So ultimately we want to transcend all three at that highest. So we want to basically work to getting towards the sattva guna because that's the highest within the manifested creation. But even then we have to go past that too. Because even that is still within the modes of creation.
Still a manifestation.
Right. So that to me is sort of like that. Once I kind of understood that, then that kind of made the whole non-doership thing make a lot of sense. You know, at least on a philosophical level. At least that was helpful to me. Any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. And then just sort of what they kind of will say, the kind of the essence of it all. If you look at verse 30, performing all actions for my sake, which is sort of bhakti yoga, right? Completely absorbed in the self, which is kind of jnana yoga, and then without expectations, which is karma yoga, you know, fight or do your thing. So, but stay free from the fever of the ego. So it's sort of, that's the essence of it all right there. It sort of sums it up in a certain sense in one thing. And then, let's see, what else? Any other comments on that so far?
Yeah, so like in Karma Yoga, you become aware that there is this self and that self is not getting affected. Sorry, that is discipline of knowledge. In Karma Yoga, you know that that is self and that is not yours. So nothing in the Prakriti is yours. Nothing, these are just the modes acting on the Prakriti. That's it. So when you know that and you practice that is Karma Yoga. And then Gyan Yoga is, you know that self is self is totally different. You become aware of that and you are established with that self. And that is Gyan Yoga. And devotion, the discipline of devotion is like that, like that love, that surrender to that supreme entity. That is devotion.
Right.
That was my interpretation of the three disciplines.
I think that's a wonderful interpretation. I think it all blends together in that sort of lens too. I really like that.
Well, because you have to surrender, to do selfless work.
Requires surrender.
It requires a certain degree of surrender, which requires a certain amount of devotion, right? And to have that sort of sense of devotion when you truly love someone or something, you then sort of realize you kind of have that oneness with that thing, right? So that sort of becomes, in a certain sense, your jnana. And so, you know, these things, again, ultimately at the end, they all sort of interlock with each other. It's just we're kind of arbitrarily breaking them apart right now, because at a certain point, when we're steeped in high ignorance and we need to break through that cycle, we need a start point. And so that's why I think for most of us, Karma Yoga is that start point, and I think that's why it's emphasized so heavily in the Gita text, because that's where most of us are at, realistically.
We have to do something, so
yeah. So because
start with doing something.
And they get into it in the next chapter, but you know, with Karma Yoga, you do it one of two ways. You do it at the point of at the time of your doing this. You're at that point not relating yourself as the doer, but you have to keep that sense of understanding within yourself all the while, right? So the jnana yogi still performs their action, but at that point they're not thinking of themselves as the doer. That's harder to do versus I'll do my actions and then I'll surrender the fruits to God, because it's a little bit easier because in the day-to-day life, it's kind of hard to keep that point of view all the time, right? I mean, it's not that it can't be done, but that's the goal, or that's what we're working towards. It's hard to do, right? Get distracted, right? So in a way, it's easier to sort of say at the end, all right, I did my best, God, you know, I surrender the fruits of this stuff to you, you know, the actions and so forth. So you're gonna...
Yeah, so I think, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about in the karma types falls into niyatam and samkha. Where does nishkama fall into this? Which, you know, I'm reading this and I'm interpreting that as like what's talked about in here as the Vedas, right? The rituals, the pujas, the things that you have to do that according to the scripture is telling you that do this and you'll purify yourself, right? So what role does that have?
Yeah, so the nishkama karma, I mean, is that what you're talking about?
Nishiddha, yeah.
Yeah.
Nishiddha, the one that is forbidden, we don't know that, right?
No, I'm talking about the nishkama.
Oh, without okay.
So I think I think most people will look at that, the nishkama karma or actions, the selfless actions, many people, and there's quotes in here that, you know, we could go back where it says, you know, you have to serve the world, you have to help the world, and a lot of people then will use nishikama karma, yoga, or whatever, selfless action, in a certain sense, is synonymous with service or seva, right? I go and I do my service to the poor, I go, you know, so lots of Indian spiritual groups, right, you know, they'll go and they feed the homeless, or they do these different things. And I think that's a certain aspect of it, but I think ultimately everything in the ideal gets to that point where we're doing all of our actions ideally at the end in that desirelessness state, right? So I think again there's a little bit of arbitrary breaking apart words and saying, well, okay, I'm going to go do my seva, I'm going to go serve the poor, I'm going to go do this, that, or other, because I'm going to be a karma yogi, so I'm going to go serve the poor. And that's great. But eventually the hope is, it's like meditation, right? Like we do the meditation, or people do their yoga, it's not to do it for its own sake, it's that in a certain sense sitting on the meditation pillow or doing the yoga asanas or whatever is training us so that when we're out in the world, in some ways, we are not immediately reacting. We're practicing in a certain sense, keeping our consciousness on the higher self, right? So I think the nishkama karma is ultimately we want to do all actions that way. That would be the final goal. Most of us are living, frankly, more so in the sakama, you know, sakama, nishida, and maybe niyata most of the time, right?
So more specifically, I'm talking. So yeah, selfless service. I understand that is a part of nishkama.
Yeah.
But in like more specifically, I'm talking about, you know, the rituals. Right, like the pujas, the, you know, verses. For example, like when we started, we read some verses.
Yeah.
So where does that fall in, and why is that important? Because, you know, if you think about why did we read the verses, who was helped by us reading the verses? Right. That's not. I don't see how that's a selfless service. If anything, it's us. You know, if we're to accept the argument that doing that will purify our souls, that seems quite selfish to me.
Okay.
Oh, that's not why I did it.
Why?
No, so we are here, so here's our selfishness. We are here for ourselves. We are here for nobody else. So so it comes across, stated that way, comes across as the most selfish thing, but you can't look at it that way. You are here for your own self and growth. You're not here, everybody here is for their own self and growth. And together we interact and we exchange and we do all of that. But again, it is not selfish, but it is for self. So there's a distinction.
In a way, too, you can reframe it of the more I help myself, the more I'm better able to help you. The more I'm better able to help people around me, the better I'm able to do my karma yoga. Yeah. So I'm taking away that selfish desire purely with that switch of a lens.
And I think the other thing, too, is when you're talking about doing the pujas, or you're talking about doing the havans, or you're talking about these kinds of things, right? Like chanting the Vedas, the pundits doing all of that. If you look at a lot of what that is, and there's quotes, you know, and again, I can't remember exactly where they are. There's whole quotes where Krishna is saying, like, look, you know, if you worship the gods, you go to the gods. If you worship the ancestors, you go to the ancestors. You know, it even says in 11, you know, honor and cherish the devas as they honor and cherish you. Though this honor and love through this love, you'll get the supreme good. All the desires are fulfilled by the devas. So the question becomes, you know, why are a lot of those pujas done? So I go and I do Ganesha puja because I'm opening my new business and I want it to be successful. Oh, it's Navratri time, I want to do Lakshmi puja, I want to do the things because I want to be rich, I want to have money, or whatever the case may be, right? So in a certain sense, a lot of those sort of karmas of those kinds of the karma kanda of the Vedas are really, if you look at a lot of it, it's, in a certain sense, it's sort of selfish. Because, or even if you're saying, well, I want to go do X, Y, and Z good things so that way I can go to Brahma Loka, or I can go to Indra Loka, or wherever the case may be, and I can bliss out in heaven and have a good time, or whatever your conception of that is, they said you still have to come back. So even the devas, even the gods, they ultimately are not at the final stage. Right? Now, the ISKCON people say differently, right? They say that Krishna Loka or Gokula Loka or whatever they call it, right, is the highest. You know, that's what ISKCON says. Right. I would say they're unique in that. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not going to sit there and be so presumptuous to say who's right or so wrong, because obviously, but all I can say is that nobody else says that. Okay? And so, take that for whatever you will, but I think it's pretty consistent that we have to go even beyond that. Like I saw I was watching the other day, because I've been mentioning it, I've been learning a lot of Kashmiri Shaivism right now, because it really folds into this really nicely. And I saw this debate between Swami Sarvapriyananda from the Vedanta Society and a professor that was from India who was a Trika Shaivism expert, and they were kind of debating back and forth. And in the comments, there was a YouTube video, and in the comments, someone was commenting and saying, they were both wonderful and how great they were, and that they said a really thing I thought was really cool. They said, both of these souls are so good that they'll walk past heaven to get to higher realms. Right? And I was like, that was really an interesting, neat way to say that. Like, they will forego heaven, in a sense, to go to the highest truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to quickly, we talk about rituals, or you talk about rituals perhaps as, I'm going to go do this ritual as a prayer, but we do rituals all the time. We're ritualing right now, right? When you're going to drive your car, you do a ritual before that. You get prepared for driving a car or a motorcycle or your mountain bike. There's ritual, so it's a connection to the act you're going to do. So when you're trying to get into this space, that ritual helps you establish that connection to God, right? So it creates that energy and the space for it. So ritual is just a preparation to get to something. So it's not necessarily like a puja.
And I don't understand any of these, so when everybody says it, I listen, but I read here, and it was really nice for me to center myself as you guys were reading it, in gratitude for every single teacher that's in this room. So in India, when I was there, they said everybody that's a visitor is like a god. And so I feel like every single one of you is that to me. So I am here for my own spiritual and enlightenment and greater happiness and greater peace and all the things. But I also know that everything that I experience here, even from the folks that didn't say anything within the discussion, you also taught me something that I will take back. And there were, Tuesday there's 115 kids that will benefit from a new way that we're going to talk about destiny and free choice in a philosophical sense. And you all have done that, and so it is selfish, and also in the sense of compassion and gratitude, it goes from the internal out into the external. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and then just two quick things, because we're actually out of time. This is one of the kind of commonly argued or discussed things about desire for God enlightenment or conscious, whatever. Is that still a desire? It's a constant debate that, you're saying to give up all desires, but then you still have this desire to be enlightened or to be liberated or to be that. So isn't that a selfish desire? And so therefore you're contradicting yourself. Everybody always has that conversation. It always comes up. And so the very common refrain is that yes, ultimately even sattvic desires are desires. Yes, even the desire for liberation needs to be transcended. Yes, but you need the boat to carry you across the river. Once you're across the river, then you leave the boat behind. And so I think that's kind of the way that I look at it, is that yes, doing this we're all here for a selfish reason, in the sense that at some point there's something in us that wants freedom, right? Wants happiness, wants freedom, wants peace. There's something that we're not getting out of just worldliness, that you came here on a Saturday morning instead of going and jogging along the river, or whatever. So the lake,
There's a lot of joggers.
So anyway, that's why we're all here. And yes, eventually I think we have to understand that that's going to have to go. But we need something to carry us in the meantime, And then just one really last minute thing, because like I said, unfortunately we're out of time. The last kind of piece, 36 to more or less the end, okay? It's the Kama Krodha Jayaha, which is the mastering, or it's the anger and desire kind of portion of things. And again, it's sort of, Arjuna asks, in 36, why do we basically do bad stuff, even though we know we're not supposed to? Why do we do stuff against our will? What is that in us that does that? And so the enemy within, so to speak, is, Krishna answers, it is selfish desire, so desire, kama, and then anger, krodha, right? Arising from the guna of rajas, and these are the appetites and evils that threatens the person in this life. And so then he says, to Arjuna in 41, fight with all your strength against your those inner tendencies, controlling your senses, conquer the enemy, which is the desires, the destroyer of knowledge and realization. And then the very last line says, use your mighty arms to slay the fierce enemy, that is selfish desire. So, so I think that again and again, that even folds into what Buddha said, right? Like, life is suffering, doing it justice, but unfortunately, like I said, the time.
We are out of time. That was wonderful.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
amazing.
you. Yeah, thank you for everyone jumping in. That was great. All right, let's quickly do the closing prayers. We just do closing prayers because why not?
That's what I do mostly.
To say thank you. To say thank you. And
it was either that or just do nothing. And so I figured, it's
Make it
probably nicer to do
shut
closing
up.
prayers.
Yes.
Make it intentional.
Exactly.
Exactly.
All right. Well, just quickly go. So, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhavet. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming and having a nice, lively discussion. It's good. I didn't have to talk the whole time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.